Just waiting to see if anybody is around. I think I might have a little bit of lag because I'm running off my phone data. I just wanted to check in like I normally would. I know it's a Sunday. I don't have much else to do, to be honest. Somebody asked a really great question recently, and it was, how do we start within our family home to change the way we think and do and be when we're raising PDAs? Hi Penny. Penny, thank you so much for all your lovely messages lately. I really appreciate them. What small changes can we make in our family home when we're raising children with severe anxiety, especially now during a time where many of our children are really feeling the upset of their routines being changed, of having no school for some of them. If your children are immunocompromised like mine, you may have made the decision to keep them at home if you're in Australia because our schools still haven't closed. So there's 3 things that I usually tell families to start implementing at home with your PDAs, with your children with severe anxiety, with your children who are having a hard time. And the first one is changing our language. So when we're raising children with a PDA profile, and if you're not sure what pathological demand avoidance is, or you haven't heard me speaking about what demands are, then there are other videos that you can watch for free that go into that. I'm just going to get straight into answering the question today. Normally I do a bit of a background on what PDA is and how the PDA brain works. So we change our language. So if I wanted to ask my child to put their socks away, hi Carrie, lovely to see you as well. I hope you're doing well. Instead, what conventionally we're taught to do as parents is to say, you do this thing and then I'll do this. So we might say, pop your socks away and then I'll get you breakfast. And I always use this example because it's an easy example. With children with a PDA profile, bargaining with them or asking something first and then we will give them what they want is always going to backfire. It's never going to work out well. So there's a couple of parts to that. What we're doing is we're implementing teamwork. So we don't have a systematic approach of they'll do their thing and then we'll do ours. Just because we're older, just because we're the parent. In the PDA brain, there doesn't really exist that social hierarchy. And that's not the result of insubordination or disrespect. It's a result of having this innate determination to keep everything even and equal. And whilst that's difficult with our children, when they become adults, they're these incredible, natural born leaders with a great sense of social justice and equity and equality. They're the people that get things done to help the rest of the people who need things done for them. So basically, when we want our child to put their socks away, what we do is, if you look up on some of the websites that give you tips around this, they'll often say, we will say to them, I wonder if you can put your socks away. Or, I wonder how you feel about putting your socks away. Now, I do go a step further than that. I totally extract the you word. Don't put you in there. So we want it to be really indirect, really non-directive. So I would say, I'd figure out what we were going to have for breakfast, and if they wanted, rice bubbles, I would say, Brekky's here, kiddo. for when those socks find their home. So I've fulfilled my part first. So initiating the process and having the breakfast there already, and then naming what you would like them to do, works out much better. But we need to keep this in mind. If they still say no, if they still receive it as a demand, and that there's a likeliness that that may happen, that's okay, because we're still making progress. We're still teaching the brain that we are willing to negotiate and that we are willing to work as a team, and that we are taking ourselves out of the position of being up here and coming down here with our children, which is the next step. So I talk more about language in some of my webinars and my videos and my writings on my page for free. But the second step is back to the social hierarchies. So PDAs, we know our parents are our parents and our educators are our educators, but we don't necessarily view people in positions of being older than us or having particular jobs in the world or positions as being more important or people that we should instantly respect. Again, that doesn't make us disrespectful or insubordinate or thinking we're better than others. It just means that we see human beings as human beings. So we still call out questionable behaviour. We still have this, I actually think it's a really healthy way of viewing the world, viewing other people. So we wouldn't just allow a person to speak badly to us because they're an educator, or because they're a school principal, or because they're a doctor, or whatever their position is. And that's where we come into the territory of people thinking that children with a PDA profile are rude or don't know their place. But actually, if we really look into that a little bit harder, the child isn't the person who's being rude. Often, the adult's the person who's been rude or inappropriate and treated the child poorly simply because they're a child, and the adult has this idea that there is a social hierarchy, which means that we instantly respect our elders. But a child with a PDA profile is going to call that out, or they're going to put a boundary in place with their parents and say, I never want to see that person again, or I will not spend time with that person. It's really important to honour that with our children, because the gift of that is that when we honour our child's boundary, then we're actually supporting them to advocate for themselves and to be less likely to find themselves in a position where somebody's going to take them for granted or take advantage of their vulnerability as autistic people. Hi Scout, hi Tanya, hi Melissa. Thank you so much, Melissa. She's doing really well today. Really, really well. Hi Shayla. Yeah, so it's not as though people have to earn our respect either. We do respect other people, but again, if there is a behaviour or a level of inappropriateness, if a PDA child has more of a fight type personality or energy, they're going to call it out. They're going to say, don't put your hands on me. Don't talk to me like that. I don't want you to be angry. And we are hypersensitive and hypervigilant to tone of voice, expression, body language, and we're going to ask a lot of questions about that and make a lot of comments about that. So, I don't want you to be angry with me, or why are you yelling at me, when we're not. We're just using a different tone as parents. Anyway, back to the point. We take ourselves out of the position of being up here as parents and our child down here, and we come down and we meet them. We just collaborate with them and negotiate. That doesn't mean we go, totally permissive and allow our children to do whatever they want. And I know some people really freak out and think that collaborating with our children means just not parenting at all. And it actually doesn't. It means just breathing out, relaxing, tuning in to who our child is, asking them questions, listening to what it is that they have to say, finding out about how their brains work, paying attention to what triggers them and what doesn't, rather than responding to their anxiety with, oh, you'll be okay. No, that's not a thing. Everybody feels like that. Instead, validating their concerns. Yeah, I understand. That does sound really scary. I totally get why you feel scared. So when we do this, we also reinforce their intuition and their instincts and help them to not self-doubt, because it's a really common thing for autistic children to be filled with self-doubt. And the first thing we do is we turn against ourselves when we believe we're getting things wrong all the time. So we meet our children, we come down here and we meet them and we collaborate with them. So somebody asked me the other day, how do you get around feeding your children breakfast when they just won't give you an answer? And this is a really common thing for children with a PDA profile. So we might say, what would you like for breakfast? Now the PDA brain receives that as a demand. So of course they may say, I don't know. And normally as parents we'll kind of stand there a bit baffled and say, okay, well, there's cereal, there's toast, there's fruit, there's yogurt, which one do you want? And we're actually adding on a plethora of demands. So we're overwhelming the PDA brain, which is by nature demand avoidant and freedom seeking, by then saying, here's your choices, what do you want? There's this misconception that if you give a child with a PDA profile a number of choices, their life is going to be made easier and they'll choose. Not every child will respond well to that, because what we can actually be doing is increasing demands. So the child might say, I don't know, and then they might feel pressured and say, I want toast. So you might cook them toast and pop it in front of them, and they will say, I don't want that. And you'll say, but that's what you asked for. And they'll say, but I don't want that. Or they might say, I didn't want that, I wanted cereal. This isn't them being insubordinate. It's not them wanting to argue. This actually means that our anxiety levels are escalated. When we become what seems to be difficult or combative or confronting, underneath that, what's really going on is that our anxiety is sky high now. Now, the thing about PDA is that our anxiety often doesn't present in the same way that other people's anxiety presents. For me, my anxiety manifests as this internal resistance. So my body might freeze and my brain will scan for all these different possibilities, these solutions to get out of what's happening right now, because it is so restricting and limiting, and I cannot cope with restrictions and limitations being put on me. So asking me what I want for breakfast is anxiety provoking. So how do we get around that? I will say to my child or my children in the morning, what would you like for breakfast? And if they say, I don't know, I say, no problem, you let me know when you're hungry and I'll give you a hand. Or, well, when you're hungry, you know where everything is. It's about letting go and trusting that our children can take care of themselves. just because a child is a child and they may have only been on the planet for 3 or 4 years doesn't mean that they can't source food for themselves. Now, I know that a lot of people will hear that and say, but they won't do that for themselves. They won't do anything for themselves. They'll ask me to do everything. That's because their anxiety, again, is escalated. And that's a whole other live. Actually, I think I did a live on this last time when our children ask us to do something we know they can do for themselves. Yeah, I did. So, yeah, letting go and trusting. Really, it's about getting creative with our parenting. It's about noticing, really being present to our children and their needs and their anxieties and what brings them joy, and letting them know it's okay. Because the thing is, whilst I will often talk about, having positive autistic identity and autism being central to my being, PDA for me is a whole other thing. And I am proud, but I separate my PDA brain from who I am sometimes, because there's what Kristy wants and what Kristy would like, and then sometimes there's the PDA response and what the PDA thinks I would like and what I would need. So, sometimes there are things that I'd like to do for myself that I can't possibly do because my threat response is elevated. My PDA brain believes that it's a threat, and it just will do whatever it can to prevent me from engaging with something that I would like to engage with. And that can be really painful when you're a child and you don't understand that process, and there are adults with an expectation of you to be able to explain what the hell's going on. Brian says, I would rather say no and drive to a convenience store in Pennsylvania to have food merely because of the demands put at home. I live in Virginia, over food. Yeah, see, that's another example. Thank you, Brian, for sharing that. I know that Brian is an adult with a PDA profile. We are all so different. But I will say this, the level of anxiety that we experience as children with a PDA profile is often aligned with the pressures, the demands, and it's really important, if you're raising children with a PDA profile, to learn about what demands are and what they look like, because many families believe that demands are when I say, go and clean your room. It's not like that at all. I mean, that would be a really awful thing to say to a PDA because it would not go well at all. But a demand is also something that's implied and not spoken out loud, an expectation. It's any kind of pressure. But we have this hypersensitivity to pressure. So demands are sometimes going to school or putting our socks on or getting out of bed. And because our brains are so similar to what a traumatized brain looks like or how it operates, we are often, the part of our brain that receives information from the environment and assesses how much of a threat it is largely overactive and overreactive. But it can be calmed down. That threat response can be calmed down with consistency. So going back to number one, when I said when we change our language and we start to collaborate, we will still probably see a lot of the behaviours and a lot of the stuff that we found hard to deal with our children going on for some time. And it might even amp up because that is a change in routine. It's a change from the normal. So if your child is used to you reacting all of the time, and I used to be that parent where I would just fly off the handle all of the time, and my 21-year-old's downstairs, and I bet if I yelled out to her, she would definitely confirm that. I would fly off the handle all the time and yell and be angry. If that's what your child is used to, all of a sudden not being like that anymore is going to be a huge change for them. And even though you would expect that that will calm their anxiety and calm their threat response, that is going to take time because of the change. Because any kind of change can escalate the threat response initially. So consistency is the key. Changing the way we speak to our children, collaborating with our children, listening to our children, respecting their no and their boundaries. And then the third thing that I always talk about is humour. Oh boy, I can't even imagine how our family and our home would operate without humour. But I guess I have an advantage being an adult PDA. I don't get a choice about that. I'm an absolute nutcase. So in our family, I said on a group session last week or the week before that so many people would probably think I am a really inappropriate parent because of the language we use in humour in our home. We call each other butthead and fart guts and poo-poo pants and all of those kind of names. Those are all our favourite words. And laughter is so key to raising children with high anxiety and a PDA profile. I'm just going to have a look at some of these questions. Debs, my 9-year-old son cannot make choices. Are choice boards with a few pictures likely to be received as a demand? It would be for me, Debs, and yes, going back to what I was saying about many PDA children finding that if we give them choices, sometimes the brain interprets that as being given more demands, but I cannot speak for every single person with a PDA profile. I know some of the families I speak to say that their children have responded really well to being given choices like that. Scout asks, if a child is on anxiety meds, assuming they are on the right dose type for them, can the PDA still escalate? Yes, I assume so, as it is such high anxiety. This is a really important question, a really, really important question. And this just reminds me of how important it is to understand pathological demand avoidance. So many families will ask me, how do you feel about meds? Will it help our children to medicate their anxiety? The first thing I want to say about that is that for many PDAs, and please excuse the terminology I'm using if you find it triggering or offensive, I'm really sorry. I do refer to myself as a PDA. I know some people don't like that. For many of us, there are two kinds of anxiety. There's the generalized anxiety that people experience that feels like extreme nervousness, apprehension going into new places or things, meeting new people, the feeling that comes over you where you might sweat or shake or have butterflies in your tummy. So the anxiety that most people have experienced, everybody has experienced, because if you didn't, you wouldn't be alive. It serves a really important function, but some of us have it in extremes. And, you know, autistic people, yes. So there's generalized anxiety. Then there's what I call my PDA anxiety. And that is this internal resistance. And it feels like rage. It feels like rage. But when I say it feels like rage, it's not like this overwhelming sense of, it's this bolt that goes through me when my brain receives a demand or what it perceives as a demand that goes, and it kind of freezes me on the spot. And it could be something as simple as someone using language that I find demanding. Not that I find demanding, but my PDA brain receives as demanding. So an example that I've used before is having a chat with one of my lovely friends who is a wonderful human being that I trust completely, and we ended a phone call and she said, sorry, that's my child calling me, and she said, make sure that later on you blah, blah, blah. I can't remember what it was, but because she said, make sure you, my response was instantly, oh, make sure. Now, I'm a 40-year-old adult, so I can observe my thoughts and feelings and my physical response to demands come and go. I can observe them from a neutral space. But that's because I have a very in-depth knowledge and understanding and awareness of how my brain and body work, my neurobiological response as a PDA. So I observed my brain coming up with all these strategies to make me disconnect from that person and never see them again. I started scanning over whether there were times where they hurt my feelings or did the wrong thing, looking for excuses to end the friendship, and there weren't any. I can go away with that and observe that process and sit with the discomfort and let it pass and come back to it days later. But that's different to being a child and being in front of somebody who wants to know why you won't do this thing that they've asked you to do. Now, in terms of medication, SSRIs, I'm assuming that's what you are talking about, can be fantastic for anxiety for many people. It changed my life. You know, I waited 40 years to try an anti-anxiety medication because I tried everything else first. And I have to say that I'm one of the very fortunate people who got the right one straight away, and I have very little anxiety anymore. But I still have PDA anxiety. I still have that neurobiological response to demands that I had before. My generalized anxiety has been calmed right down, which absolutely helps, because it means that if I'm not in a space of having escalated general anxiety in the first place, then I'm not reacting. My PDA brain is not reacting to as much as it previously would have. But I'm still a PDA-er. I'm still going to have that neurobiological response. Penny says, in current COVID-19 wash your hands climate, oh, don't even get me started on this, how to deal with PDA not washing hands. Yeah, important public health at the moment. Plus, what about people with OCD who've been trying to get kids not to wash hands too often? Oh my God, Penny, you must be in my head. I hate washing my hands. I hate it. It is a major sensory problem for me. And I think growing up, because there was this rule about when you go to the toilet or when you do this or that, you must wash your hands. Being a PDA, if that information is drummed in like that, you know, it's this instant neurobiological response that, oh, F you, I'm not going to do it. And it's so hard for people to understand that it's not an attitude thing. It's not related to my personality. It's just this innate drive to be free, to have as much autonomy over myself as possible. And so it has been difficult. But now is different. The thing about being a PDA is we like to know what's in it for us. We have to know how this will benefit us and others. And going back to when I was saying about, you know, having this strong drive for social justice and looking after other people and being on an even playing field, this is where we get to see that PDA is not just about a child or a person only thinking about themselves and wanting everything to go their way all the time. It's about needing freedom and autonomy, but we really care about other people. I hate using soap. I hate washing my hands. So does one of my children. But at the moment, I'm washing them like crazy, and I'm living through it, washing my hands, but in the grand scheme of things, it's kind of a life or death situation. So, you know, it's hard for me to say because I can only speak for myself around that process. And even now I'm experiencing the anxiety thinking about washing my hands so much. And yeah, it's really, really hard. But I think being transparent with our children, letting them know why, not lying to them, not trying to manipulate them. And when I hear the word strategies, I have a PDA response to that because I instantly think dishonesty or manipulation. And I know that's not what it always means, but it's so important for us to know that we can trust people and people will be real with us. Just seeing if there's any more questions. Okay. I am going to go. Thank you so much for joining me, everybody. I feel so blessed to have this beautiful community that I can connect with. It's keeping me sane. I hope you're all doing okay. I really do. Sending love to everyone. Look after yourselves. Wash your damn hands. Oh, wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. Have a lovely Sunday. Connect again soon. Bye.